On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 2006. We're going to be taking a look at Orleans, and they're going to be performing their version of Dancing in the Moonlight. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So I did feature Orleans a few weeks ago now, it might have even been last month, and I did say that I'd do another video covering some of their history, but it's also going to be interesting to look at this performance and the cover version of Dancing in the Moonlight because of the arrangement that they put together vocally. But let's get these guys up on screen and see how they get on.
We get it almost every night. And when that moon gets big and bright, it's supernatural delight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Everybody here is out of sight. They don't bark and they don't bite. They keep things loose, they keep things light. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and right. It's such a fine and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this video is going to be in the description below, so you guys can check it out there without me interrupting it. But what a fantastic vocal arrangement we have here, but instrumentally as well. They are all over this performance. And when you have quality vocalists in a band, I always say about having one vocalist, and it's great if you can get another guy who could harmonize with you to really fill in that sound. But when you've got a stage full of top musicians and vocalists, this is the kind of thing you get. A lot of people here in the UK will associate this track with a band called Top Loader, who released their version of it here in the year 2000, and that was a monster hit for them. It went multi-platinum, that release. Of course, it was initially released in 1972 by King Harvest, and they had a massive hit with it back then. But this arrangement that we've got, everything is going on here. And just to mention as well, the writer of this particular song, Sherman Kelly, was the brother of Wells Kelly, who was the original drummer in Orleans back in the day. So there's that link there, and I believe he was actually at this performance watching. It just so happened that it worked out to be a King Harvest release because that was where Sherman Kelly went, and then his brother was with Orleans. The other video that I did was Dance With Me, and that was another showcase of the amazing vocal talents on show. But I also want to just draw your attention to John on lead guitar here, John Hall, to give his full name, because he's playing some really cool stuff here, throwing in some really nice fills, really subtle vibrato, and that tone that he's got is so good. It is thick, it is middly, it's got a little bit of delay on there as well, subtle, but it's definitely in there. You do actually see when the verse starts, where John's about to come in with his vocal, he has to turn off his lead sound that has a just hint of distortion on there, but more crunchy than anything. And he's getting rid of that, getting rid of the delay, back to his clean rhythm sound. And that's often something you'll find when you're playing live, trying to organize your change of effects with your vocal phrases and try and time them in between so that one doesn't overlap the next. But sometimes that will happen. It's only natural and something that you just have to deal with in live performances. Another thing to look out for is when we have this extended intro and the lead work from John. When that vocal does come in from Lance Hoppen, he is dead on pitch and straight in. Sometimes you'll find that some singers take a little bit of time to get attuned to the key and need maybe a word or two to hit that level, whereas Lance is just straight in, bang on with his pitch, melody, control, vibrato, everything's there. And this is what I mean about just having quality vocalists throughout the whole band. And when you've got John taking over as well in that second verse, and then we're also going to be having Larry Hoppen coming in with some vocals next. So getting into the guitar work here, we'll have a look at the fill shape that John's using, also some concepts about playing a few more notes within your pentatonic shape 1 in the major and minor keys. But kicking off with the chords, we're starting with F minor, and then we're going into a B flat. And then next, there's two ways of playing this E flat that we've got. You can play it as an E5 here, and we're going to have a little rundown. So it means that we're changing to the little finger just moving down. Take off your first finger. Down to C minor. Back to the B flat again. Back to the F minor. So that all together. Along those lines. The other way to play it is to start with same two chords and now shift up to the 6th fret with your first finger, and we're playing an E flat here. And for the rundown, I'm effectively playing a B flat, and if you want the full chord you have to squash down your second finger like that, but I'm playing the D with my first finger, which means that you get the rundown sound on that A string of. So playing through that as an example. But you'll find that this sound and it's going to sound pretty much exactly the same. It's up to you where you want to go with it. The only advantage is that when you do move up to the 6th fret, if you want to get into your full shape with that high E string, then you can. Whereas down at the bottom here, that's only going to be 3 strings that I'm playing there, intentionally muting that high E string because you don't want that ringing out. Getting into the fill shapes being used here, you want to get into this E flat position or bar chord, because then we've got that 2 fret slide up on the A string if you want to get into your pentatonic shape 1 in the major key, of course, and that's going to be the shape that's being used. And when you bar with your first finger, if you're playing notes on that A string, for example, you start getting this fill sound because you're barring that first finger, which is giving you the majority of your chord, because that's what your 3rd finger plays in this chord shape. So any line you want to play, you can always bounce back to that chord just to fill out the sound. Into the intro lead, we're not going to go through the whole thing and the whole song, it's not an instructional video, but just to give you guys an indication of what's going on with John's playing, we start with our quite an aggressive strike on the strings with a lot of muting going on with the rest of the strings. I just want to hear that B as I bend up on the 11th fret, and I'm bending a tone here, so it means you want to end up to the note that you'll get 2 frets higher up, like that. And we've got that sound. So there was a, going back to your destination where you started with your bend, which is going to be our 11th fret. And this is all shape 1. So that's what you can relate it to when you're playing this, because you can then just transpose this to every other key if you want to start coming up with your own lines and doing these bends. So it means that we've got this. And we've got that little rake across the strings there. I'll do that again. And it's quite an aggressive rake and then fretting of that high E string. And here we're going to be on the 8th fret. So doing that in slow motion, once we've ended that first phrase, we're getting that kind of sound. And we go, again, really tasteful lines here, hammer-ons, pull-offs, from that B string down to the G string. And then we have the, and again, barring with the first finger. So this is another thing that you'll find, exiting a shape that you're in order to get that stylized slide. So it means that we are still in shape 1 here, but we leave the shape by taking the 3rd finger down to where the first finger was and slide up. So you're sliding into the shape, and you'll hear that kind of fill sound all the time, of that slide into the fill sound. So once we've got to the end of that phrase, and then we're into the verse proper at that point, that's where the vocal then comes in. Just as a final thought, when you are playing through pentatonic shape 1, and you get all the way down to your root note, you can play your major scale. And if you want to start incorporating some of those notes from the major scale into your pentatonic shape 1, then you can do that. For example, if I now play from that E string down to the G string of the major scale, but put it where I'm playing my pentatonic shape 1, you'll find that the muscle memory required to do that will take a bit of practice, but you'll start to be able to pick out these notes. And you're not going to want to play it like that when you're playing any kind of lead line, because it will sound like a scale. But if you combine it with the other notes, the shapes, and the, you can start to really throw it in there and make it a little bit more interesting, rather than just sounding always like a pentatonic shape 1. Also, if you want to take that first finger down, you can go through the whole scale and find where these notes are. And I'm playing this all in my mind inside the pentatonic shape 1 box. So we've got this, obviously ending on my little finger, because that's the root note of the chord that we're playing in, because we're playing in E flat major. So it means that when you're playing through, you might have, you might want to throw in that extra little note just sliding down, and you'll be amazed, especially with really common progressions, how well this works. You can just start throwing it in there. And the other massive hack about this is that when you play in the minor key and you're playing pentatonic shape 1, it's the same fingers, the same positions you're going to want to use. For example, if I'm now playing in the minor key, and I'll play exactly what I just played in exactly the same way, but now it sounds minor because your brain will organize it that way. So obviously we've also got a C minor here, which means it's the relative of E flat. So it is the same notes, the same lead notes you're going to be playing. It's all about where you end your lead notes, because here I'm ending on the root note of the chord, so it makes sense, but it's all the same notes that we've previously just had in our E flat. But anyway, when you start applying these extra notes to your pentatonic shape 1, it's going to give your playing a totally different sound. So that pentatonic shape 1 sound. But let's jump back into the performance and we'll watch it until the end.
We like our fun, we never fight. You can't dance, stay uptight. It's a supernatural. Do you like everybody's dancing in the moonlight? Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm. If you're feeling warm, that's right. Natural sight. Everybody's dancing one more time. Everybody dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm. Feeling warm, that's right. Feeling so fine. Dancing in the moonlight.
And there we have it. Everyone get up on your feet, because that's not the kind of performance you see day in, day out. Just a shout out as well to Larry's vocal. When he comes in, again, another quality voice within the band. Larry Hoppen, by the way, having great ability instrumentally, technical ability playing lead guitar, but also those bluesy throwaway lines that he has in his vocal where he'll tail off at the end of a line. Also a little vocal ad-lib in there as well. It is so well put together. This arrangement of the song just takes it to a totally different place, and especially having the quality lead work in there as well. It's the kind of thing that's right up my street. It's another thing to point out about the top bands and also the top lead guitarists. They all seem to throw in just enough and leave enough space in there as well. As they always say, it's not what you play, it's what you don't play that makes the great players. And here, it would be so easy for John just to get into a shred fest or play loads and loads of notes, because we're in E flat and you're just in your pentatonic shape 1. You can go through as many scales as you want to, but musically it's not about that. It's about conveying a message and communicating to your audience. And this is a lead guitar section in the intro, but also in the outro that suits it so well. I know that we do have another solo in the middle there where Larry joins in with the harmony guitar, but it's so well played technically, but so well played musically, because they pitch it exactly right so that it doesn't overshadow the song, it's just part of the song, and that's what it's all about. Getting into the history, it was Wells Kelly, the original drummer, who met John Hall, and they got together, played in bands. It was in 1972 that Larry Hoppen joined the band, and it was only a trio at this point. So there was Larry, Wells, and John, and they would often switch instruments when they played live because of the multi-instrumental ability that they had. And it wasn't until later in 1972 that Lance, who was Larry's brother, then got invited along in order to play bass, and he was his younger brother, which meant that Larry was then more free to play guitar and keys. So in the early 70s, they got out there as much as possible and played at all the clubs they could, also got on the college circuit, and they would cross paths with other artists playing the same circuits, Bonnie Raitt, Tom Waits, Hall & Oates as well. And Rolling Stone magazine at that time said that they were the best unrecorded band in the USA. But fortunately, they did make enough of a noise to then get signed to ABC Dunhill Records in 1973, and that same year, they released their debut album called Orleans. Unfortunately, that first album didn't do particularly well, and in 1974 they released Orleans 2, and that was only released by the record label in Japan and Europe, and again, it didn't hit any big numbers, and didn't have any hot singles on the album, according to the record label, so they were dropped. But fortunately, they were heard at Max's Kansas City nightclub by Chuck Plotkin, and Chuck was the head of A&R for Asylum Records at that time. He liked what he heard, and he was a producer. So he took their songs, reproduced them, and in 1975, they managed to get their first hit, and that was Let There Be Music, which got to number 55 in the charts, and that came from the album of the same name, their third album release. They were riding high in 1975, and after the success of Let There Be Music, they released Dance With Me. That was the next single, and that was even more popular. It was a monster hit. It got to number 6 in the charts. Also, Still the One was released in 1976, got to number 5 in the charts, another monster hit, and that came from the Waking and Dreaming album. What followed was a huge tour with Jackson Browne, and by the way, Jackson's here on the channel somewhere if you want to check him out independently. And in 1977 is when they released Reach, and that got to number 51 in the charts. Unfortunately, this was around the time when there were disagreements in the band over musical direction, and John Hall left in 1977, shortly followed by Jerry Marotta, and Jerry had joined just the year before as the second drummer, which freed up Wells to do more vocals. So the Hoppen brothers and Wells Kelly decided to continue and added to the band and ended up signing another deal, this time with Infinity Records. And in 1979, they released Forever, and a hit from that album, which got to number 11, was called Love Takes Time. And at this point, they were also on tour, touring with acts such as Stephen Stills and Chicago. In 1980, Infinity Records went bankrupt, and they didn't promote the album that Orleans had recorded called Just Orleans. And in 1981, Wells left the band. He was originally drumming with Charlie Shue, who had joined the band, so they still had the two-drummer setup, but once Wells left, then Charlie just took over as the main drummer. Also, the Hoppen brothers got in touch with their younger brother Lane, and he joined the band as well on keys, so there were now 3 Hoppen brothers in Orleans, and they continued and signed to Radio Records. They also found out that during their time with Infinity Records, they were trying to promote their album by playing at amusement parks, but their management had misappropriated some funds, which meant that they were actually in debt. So the record label went bust, they were in debt, but they continued and signed to Radio Records, like I said. They released One of a Kind in 1982, but unfortunately, again, as soon as that album hit the shelves, Radio Records went bust. So it meant that there was no money to promote the album, to do a tour, so they had to go back to playing clubs. Sadly, Wells Kelly died in 1984, and the guys reunited to play at a memorial service, and that led to the album in 1986, Grown Up Children, being released, and that featured Chet Atkins, Ricky Skaggs, Steve Wariner, Bela Fleck as well, all of which you can find on the channel here somewhere. But they continued into the 90s and released Analog Men, Ride as well, and in the 2000s, Dancin in the Moonlight was released, and Obscurities was the last album in 2008. And sadly, Larry Hoppen died in 2012. There have been a lot of personnel changes over the years, as I'm sure you guys can appreciate. I won't have time to get into the details of that, but it's great to have a look back at these guys in 2006 with a fantastic live version and arrangement of Dancin in the Moonlight. Thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!